Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Wow. I don't know if I should look up for UFOs or down for ghosts. It's a weird universe, I know, but to be confronted by both mysteries at the same time is awe-inspiring and possibly even frightening and dangerous at the same time.
Well, that shouldn't bother you too much. You've been confronted by the unknown since you were a youngster. Now, me, I take this all calm and cool, like a good researcher should.
Well, why are you shivering then? It's not that cold down here in the haunted cellar. Once we get down these rickety old stairs and dust away those cobwebs, which I'm allergic to, and turn on all the flashlights we're carrying and all the gear, all your fears will dissolve. I promise them it will. They'll dissolve.
Are you sure about that? Don't look beside you, but there's a shadowy figure following us around, and he doesn't look too friendly. I wish we were back in the KCOR studios.
You're just chicken.
Uh-huh.
We'll never make it as a big league parapsychologist like our special guest tonight has. Mm-hmm. Well, let's get back to the studio then. If you're going to be such a frightened kitty cat.
I'm hearing ghostly music.
All right. Well, we're back in the studio, Tim.
Thank heavens.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I didn't think it was that spooky. I mean, the shadowy figure I can get used to. I'm always being shadowed by some figure or another.
You sure that shadowy figure isn't the IRA?
Well, let's not talk about that. Hey, we got a great show coming up this evening, and one of my favorite parapsychologists, whom we both agree we met many, many years ago, but the location of our meeting it varies. I don't know. I remember it as being here in New York, and Barry says it was in Venice. Well, I'm not sure about that, but I do know that it involved a case that we were both investigating at the time, and I know that because I just came across the particulars this week. Tim, you and I were working on putting this book together, Alien Strongholds on Earth. Mm-hmm. And there's a chapter in there about the Superstition Mountains. It's one of the places we recommend actually that people don't go hunting for UFOs, because a lot of people disappear. They're looking for the lost Dutchman mine, and they end up being abducted by UFOs, and their life is never the same. In fact, the case involved a gentleman by the name of Brian Scott, who apparently was very sincere, and he had a lot of weird phenomena that took place around him, and he ended up talking in tongues, although he called it channeling, and he even had his bed caught on fire one evening through some sort of fireball phenomena. But why don't you officially introduce our guest now, Tim, and we can carry on with the conversation.
Well, certainly, it'd be my pleasure. Tonight, we have with us Dr. Barry Taff, who is a world-renowned parapsychologist who worked out of UCLA's former parapsychology laboratory from 1969 through 1978 as a research associate. Now, during his 4-decade career, Dr. Taff has investigated more than 4,500 cases of ghost hauntings, poltergeists, and conducted extensive studies in telepathy and precognition, eventually developing the initial protocols and methodologies for what was later termed remote viewing. Now, in one of his cases, Dr. Taft investigated in 1974. Now, this gained international fame as the book and motion picture, The Entity, starring Barbara Hershey and Ron Silver, and was released by Fox in 1983. Dr. Taft served as a technical advisor on The Entity, as well as being represented in the film by the character Gene Kraft. What's unknown by the media is the fact that in real life, The Entity followed its female victim for quite some time after their initial investigation, continuing its vociferous nature for quite some time afterwards. Now, Dr. Taft has consulted for government, business, and law enforcement, including such number agencies as the CIA, the Office of Naval Intelligence, and the National Security Agency. Dr. Taft has served as a technical advisor or script doctor in the films Logan's Runs, Demon Seed, Alter States, Poltergeist, and, of course, The Entity. I love all those movies, by the way. And he's also author of the book, one of my favorite books. It's the book that I keep in my personal library all the time, Aliens Above, Ghosts Below. So, Dr. Barry Taft, thank you very much for being with us tonight on Exploring the Bizarre.
It's my pleasure to be here. I've been looking forward to it for some time.
Hey, well, I have a question. Actually,
Sure.
Well, I have several questions, many questions, but I think we should maybe let the audience in on this. What exactly is a parapsychologist? Now, I was just discussing this with the young lady, Carol, who works in my office here today. I didn't think that there were any colleges or universities that had classes or any kind of degrees in parapsychology anymore. Is that correct?
Well, there was Kennedy State University up in Northern California near San Francisco, and you used to be able to get a master's degree in it. And there was Edinburgh University in the UK. They had a doctoral program. I don't know if that's still functional or not, or operative. And there were a couple other schools that offered classes. We used to teach it at UCLA 1973, 74, 75, 76, 3 quarters out of 4 in Moore Hall 100, where people were hanging on the rafters so long ago. But see, a parapsychologist is, in essence, a scientist. And a parapsychologist can be anything from an electrical engineer to a medical doctor to a psychiatrist to a dermatologist to an ophthalmologist. And they take the knowledge they've gained from their formal education and in studying the history of the field, and they incorporate their knowledge into exploring the field, hoping to get answers. My background is the degree is in psychophysiology and biomedical engineering. Psychophysiology is the relationship of the brain to the body to behavior. So it deals with psychology, it deals with neurology, it deals with anatomy, neuroanatomy, neurophysiology, electrophysiology, whatever. And then biomedical engineering is developing tools to use in working with the human body in various applications. And through that, I actually developed 6 patented medical devices. Not that we've gotten them on the market. It's very expensive to get something through the FDA. It millions of dollars. I won't get into that. It's boring. But this is what Go ahead.
Your background is. No, I was just going to say then, aren't there some people that are floating around who claim to be parapsychologists who would not be because they have no degree?
Well, again, just like I said, I didn't go to Edinburgh. Okay, I didn't go to Kennedy State University up in Orinda. It's a question of parapsychologist who has taken their professional academic background, whatever it is, and applied that in studying the field. See, anyone could be a paranormal investigator. It's like, well, let's say you're a plumber by day, you run around at night chasing demons that aren't there. That's not parapsychology. There's 2 ways you can do research in parapsychology. One is in a lab, meaning in a university or a research hospital, and you're applying controlled experiments conducted trying to explore certain avenues of the phenomena. Okay. The other is in the field, where you must collect data over a very long period of time and look to see if there are patterns in the longitudinal data. And if you look deeply enough and are willing to ask the right questions of people you interview and record the data enough from the environment, you will see the patterns. So they're right. I mean, Dr. Stanley Krippner is a retired.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
He was a parasite.
Oh, sure.
There was, I can't remember everyone's name. Dr. Moss, Dr. Thelma Moss,
Thelma
ran
Moss, right.
our lab at UCLA. Oddly enough, she started life out not as an academician. She started life out as an actress and a writer. And she actually wrote a script called The Colossus of New York, late 1950s. Actually, it's quite a good film, very well written. I've seen it several times, and it's somewhat, I guess, prescient on her part, because it deals with transplanting a dying man's brain into a robot, and the robot acquires paranormal abilities suddenly. And actually, it's a good movie. Ross Martin was in it. Otto Kruger was in it. A good film. Anyway, so then she was an actress and a writer, and then she was married and had 2 children. Her husband died, and it tore her apart because they were really close. And she had problems with that. She got over it. She decided they won't go away from acting, and she went back to school and got a PhD in clinical psychology. And then she became a medical psychologist at UCLA's Neuropsychiatric Institute, which is where the lab was. That's how I met her. And so the parapsychology
she became a I wouldn't say expert. I don't know if that's the right word, but she became a spokesman for like life after death.
Well, she had a lot of interests regarding parapsychology. Part of that was studying discarnate intelligence. Part of that was she was using hypnosis in some research, past life therapy and regression, things like that. Mm-hmm. It all depended on what she was doing. She was a very intelligent, articulate woman. And now, in my personal opinion, the worst mistake she made in this field was she got involved with the work called Kirlian photography, which, while visually stunning, was not the product of anything paranormal as far as we could determine, meaning science could determine. It produced incredible photos.
The Russians were big on that, but also Dr. Krippner. You mentioned him, Dr. Krippner. They even had a floating a laboratory or boat or something that went around Manhattan, and there was a fellow who had a huge collection of Kirlian, photographs, and so you could get out. Yeah, you could get on the boat and watch this, and then they let you off at the next dock or something like many years ago. Many years ago.
But Kirlian photography was interesting. So when Dr. Moss met a man named Kendall Johnson, and he built a Kirlian device. He brought it in the lab, and they started experimenting with it, and they built better and better ones and bigger ones and more uniquely operational and different. They could adjust the parameters, the electrical discharge. And I said, wait a minute, this isn't what you think it is. And I brought in an old Tesla coil I had. I hooked it up to a conductive plate and put an acrylic sheet over it so you don't burn yourself. I said, this is what you're doing. And I said, it's, corona discharge photography. She published lots of papers, but her academic background was in clinical psychology. It wasn't in biomedical engineering or electrophysiology or biophysics. And and also her career at UCLA was as a clinical psychologist. So she had patients. And you also have to publish articles in your field, which was clinical psych. And it was interesting that she spent a lot of time working with me when I first met her. She did a study on me that was published in a medical journal in the mid-'70s. And so the study proved that I was telepathic or precognitive. And how, why, we don't know. But it worked, and it worked better than we thought it would. And that took up a lot of time. And instead of continuing with more of the ESP research, she got sidetracked in the Kirlian work, which didn't help her. The staff of UCLA's Neuropsychiatric Medical Institute. Didn't like her because she was an entrepreneur. She was a person who thought out of the box. She was a creative individual, and they want you to be, a nut and bolts. You do the same thing every day, blah blah blah. And she wasn't following that, and it cost her her career. I mean, she was promoted from an assistant professor to an associate professor, which is what you're supposed to do. But at the same time, she was made an adjunct professor. So it was one step forward, two steps backwards. And she left UCLA, I think, like in 1980 or something like that, and had private practice. And then she became ill and passed away in, I think, the late 90s. And she was just a year younger than my mom. So she was like, being like with my mom, although my mom wasn't like her. It was interesting. After the study was done on me, Dr. Moss and then Dr. Herbert Eveloff, and there was another graduate student working with them. The study was done, so Dr. Moss called to talk to my parents. So my father wasn't around, but my mom was. And Dr. Moss said, Barry's really intelligent. He's got a high IQ, and he's very gifted psychic. And she said, "Are you talking about Barry?" And Dr. Moss said to my mother, "Do you have any other children?" "No." "Yes, I'm talking about Barry." "Oh, he's crazy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He has all this weird stuff going on around him, and we don't want to talk about it." But there was one thing I've been able to do my whole life that's as easy for me to do as looking at a page on my computer. I'm what's called the medical intuitive. And in the study done on me, started in 69, ran through about 72 to conduct it, there was clear evidence of that, where I was able to perceive what the person was feeling at a distance. And now it's gotten to the point where I can look at someone I've never seen, I don't know, even sometimes photographs, and I can tell sort of what's wrong with them. If they're in front of me, it's really vivid. An example of that was in 2014, I met a woman online, looked like a young Joan Collins, beauty beyond compare. Stunning. And I'm looking at her picture and go, wow, and I got the feeling that she's not very healthy, but she looks beautiful. So we finally spoke sometime later, and I said to her, "Look, I have to ask you this. You don't want to respond, I understand." And I said to her, I got a feeling you're not that healthy. You've got a lot of medical problems, and I railed off what I felt. "How could you know that?" I said, "I'm looking at your photographs." We've never met, perhaps simply because I don't want to get sick around her. The last real girlfriend I had, I met through a friend of a friend of a friend, and she looked like a short Joan Severance, the actress. Anyway, we were going out, and everything was okay, and then suddenly I started feeling sick around her, and her name was Judy. And I said, "Judy, look, I can't see you anymore." Well, I said, "Well, got a couple of problems, and they're killing me." She goes, "What?" "Well, you have the early onset of menopause." She was just a couple of years younger than me. And then you have a prolapsed mitral valve. And she goes, "Well, what? A prolapsed mitral valve. How can you know that?" I said, "I'm sitting next to you." And so this has been a problem I've had my whole life. On my website, there's a lengthy article. The website's barrytaft.net, www.barrytaft.net. One of the better stories I wrote, an article, was called "A Different Kind of Psychic, Being a Medical Intuitive." I get into a lot of this. And the question is, what am I doing? And how am I doing it? And other people can do this. Some people could learn to do it. Others cannot. And it's cost me a lot of friends and acquaintanceships and relationships.
Now, do you pick this up? Do you pick this up like psychically by sitting next to a person, or can you actually see inside their body?
Both.
Okay.
An example. This is when The Dark Knight came out, the second Batman movie in the Dark Knight trilogy. So I went to a screening in a theater near me. I met an old friend there I've known since UCLA days. We each drove separately, so we sit down. The movie starts, and suddenly my bladder feels burning and cramping, horrible pain. Ugh. What's going on? I was like, I don't have this kind of a problem. And the girl got a call from her daughter and had to leave. Wasn't important. I couldn't help her, so she left. I stayed behind. As soon as she was gone, I felt fine. I found out the next day she had a bad bladder infection. Next time you tell me we sit 5 seats apart. It's kind of a joke, the whole thing. It's 1973. Met a girl, came to one of the seminars we did in the lab, and it looked like a young, short Shirley MacLaine with dark hair. So we met, long story short. We're sitting talking in her apartment in Westwood, and I said, her name was Carol. I said, Carol, what's that? You got a tumor here in your left breast. She goes, what? It's a tumor. And I showed her where it was. What do you mean a tumor? It's a tumor. Don't worry, it's benign. How do you know it's benign? I say, there's no calcium growing around it. And she, what? Okay, I don't want to hear it again. Stop. So, weeks later, she got her job, finished her degree at UCLA. She got a job, had to go to work for this big company, and they had to give her a medical workup for insurance purposes. Long story short, they found a lump in her breast. They did a biopsy. It was the tumor. Thank God it wasn't malignant. It was benign. They took it out anyway, and it was exactly where I told her it was. And then she said, you scare the hell out of me. I can't be around you. You're starting to freak me out. I said, but I helped you. I don't want that type of help. Then, the last thing we did together, we saw the opening night of The Exorcist in October of 1973. So, I already met the writer and the director. They came into our lab, and, it's a movie. I don't get scared in movies because I'm in a theater and, surrounded by a lot of people. So, during the first act where Linda Blair is being bounced around in the bed, you don't know what's going on. I turned to Carol, and I've got this loud projector voice. And I said, I've been a bed do that in a house in Hollywood. And from the front of the theater, our voice booms out, hey, Barry, is that you? It was a professor of mine from UCLA who knew the kind of work I was doing. And Carol was just freaked out. And I can't be around you. I don't know what you're going to say next, what you're going to pick up. I can't take it. I can't. She says, every time I see you, I'm worried about what little tidbit of knowledge about me you're going to tell me that I don't want to know. That was the end of that. But I mean, the question is, how do I do what I do? I can't tell you. If in Man of Steel came out in 2013, and I think the first or second act of the movie, there's a scene where a young Clark Kent's in school and his X-ray vision cuts in. That is almost identical to what happened to me when I was 10 years old. Not similar. It's identical. It's exactly what I saw. Brilliant color, 3D. And I maybe kind of sick to my stomach. What am I doing? And it's discussed on my website.
All right, I'm going to have to interrupt you here because we have to go to our bottom of the hour break. We'll be right back for more Exploring the Bizarre, so stay tuned.
Now back to Exploring the Bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal, your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
All right, welcome back to Exploring the Bizarre. I'm Tim Swartz. Tonight, we're talking with Dr. Barry Taff. Dr. Taff, at the beginning of the program, we briefly mentioned that the group that you were with at UCLA investigated what later became known as the Entity Case, and they ended up making a movie about it, which I know they took some grand liberties with the with what actually happened. But I think a lot of people would be surprised to know that this was an actual case, that at least some parts of it actually happened.
Exactly. Well, I have to say up front that we did not have the means or the money or the funds to build a replication of her house and put, like we're in the novel that Frank D. Felitta wrote that became the movie The Entity. In the novel, we use holographic laser cameras, and we use thermal imaging, and we use supercooling technology to try to trap the phenomena. Well, we didn't use any of that because it existed, but it was not affordable. So we go out. My colleague and I go out. It was August 22nd, 1974, on Braddock Drive in Culver City, California, which is a suburb of Los Angeles. So a very warm night. Her house had no air conditioning. It was very hot and muggy, and like going into a steam bath almost. And you walk in there, had a really strange odor. And we sat down and talked with her, and the first thing she tells us right off the top is that she's been repeatedly raped by a ghost. We went, what? Well, huh? What? And we rolled our eyes back. I thought, oh, this woman needs psychiatric intervention, medication or something. Well, they didn't have antipsychotic medication then. But anyway, we listened to her. We were talking, and we just said, look, there's not much we can do. We're sorry, but here's some names to call at UCLA. Maybe they can help you. And okay. Now, about 10 days later, she called us back, and she said the phenomenon is there, and her friends, people, neighbors have witnessed it. Okay, we come back. Wasn't that far from, UCLA. And we go there, and again, it was still very hot. Her bedroom was ice cold, but there was no air conditioning. We're in her kitchen with her speaking. One of the lower cupboard doors flies open, and an iron skillet goes flying across the kitchen several feet away. No springs, no children, no animals in there to push it or throw it. Anyway, the case evolved into where we started seeing, beyond just things moving, we started seeing these strange corpuscular masses of light, like a lava lamp used to be way back when, and they were gelatinous, and they would zip around the room, always in green, like a lime green, and we got some pictures, but we had no reference how big it was, where it was coming from, where it was going to, the speed at which it was moving. So we covered her bedroom walls, where the phenomena seemed to be focused, with black poster boards with duct tape forming a grid, like a checkerboard grid, and every board would have a number and a magnetic orientation. We started getting pictures, and what was ironic was, this is important to understand, is what we photographed, which I'll explain in a moment, what we photographed, we did not see. What we saw, we couldn't photograph. At one point, the lights were zipping around the room between all of us, and we were having a seance at the time, we were attempting to, and they coalesced in the corner of the room near where Doris Beither, that was the woman's name, where she was, and they coalesced, and they formed a very large man, 6'2", 6'3", couldn't make out salient feature. You could see the head, the brow ridge, you could see the upper torso, and it was dynamic. It was articulating. It was looking at us, and then lime green again, then pop, went out. And we turned the lights on. I told everyone, don't say anything. Here's some paper. Write down what you saw, but don't talk to each other. We all pretty much saw the same thing. But it was odd. We had 3 professional photographers with us. We had high-end cameras. Lots of pictures were taken. No apparition. What we did catch was an arc of light that framed Doris Beither. She's sitting on her bed, and you see this perfect arc of light over her, like a perfect arc. Now, so that means that either it was invisible to the naked eye, or because we weren't shooting fast enough, the light was moving in the arc, and it produced a comet-like tail because the speed of the camera wasn't quick enough. But we never saw it. Another picture from that same evening, in another angle on that bedroom, you see two arcs, one going from top to top, the other from bottom to bottom. We never saw that either. Then across the way, on the other side of the room were these closets with these roll-open doors. And we took pictures of that because we were seeing lights. And what you saw was a face, thick brown hair, or thick hair, a strong jaw, but it would. And then my colleague at the time ended up throwing the original photograph out in the mailbox, and we couldn't get it back. But it didn't matter. Bottom line, the woman moved. Oh, no, wait. I have to back up. We were there at our house from August through 10 weeks. We were there coming back on a regular basis. She calls us one night and she says all the poster boards have been torn down. And she was small like me. She wasn't a tall woman. Kind of frail, very fragile looking. And so we come there and yeah, all the poster boards are torn down, as was the paint and some of the plaster in this little shack of a home. And she could have done it, gotten up on a ladder, but from her reaction and her shaking, no, she wasn't an actress. So the last night we were there, she was yelling, and this is in my book, Aliens Above, Ghosts Below. I think it's one of the early chapters called The Real Life Entity Case. And at one point, we're talking to the ghost to do something beyond the lights, and suddenly the duct tape was pulled off in front of her face. One of the poster boards comes flying across the room and hits Doris in her head. And we asked it to do it again. It did, but it didn't hit in her head. It landed by her feet. So she was at that point, she was able to move. She moved from Culver City to Carson. And the phenomena followed her. We didn't know where she was. Frank DeFelitta tracked her down because he had already met her. He'd come out and interviewed her. And new place, her neighbors knew nothing about her. No public never heard of her. We hadn't written up the articles for publication yet and what we already did there. And suddenly she moves in, and neighbors flanking her on both sides, they begin experiencing poltergeist activity. What? So it's like a proximity effect? We're there once, and suddenly this big vase with flowers and dirt in it comes flying across the room and misses all of us, but it hits the floor, breaks, and spreads everything across the floor. So she moved then from there to either Riverside or San Bernardino. Frank followed her there. The toilets were flushing, and the water was turning itself on in the bathroom and the sinks, doors opening and closing. And then she disappeared, and we didn't know where she was. And we found out that she died I guess the late 80s. I don't remember off the top of my head. But she passed away. And the doctors, only they said it was cardiopulmonary arrest. But as to what caused that, they can't tell you. Now, one of her sons, now I should say we first met her children. The youngest child was a daughter, a little girl. We never met her. Thankfully, she wasn't there. Her three boys were very rambunctious, and hormones were going nuts. They were yelling and fighting with each other. They hated us for interfering with their lives. And one of them was interviewed on ghosttheory.com, and he contradicted himself every other time he spoke. He'd say something, then he'd contradict it. Something else. There were three sons. Apparently, two out of the three are pretty messed up in terms of substance abuse. The good one finally was spoken to by the man Javier Ortega, and he said, "Yeah, this stuff was going on till almost the day she died, but it got weaker." So, back then we were all sort of ignorant about this stuff, and we thought maybe it's exactly what it was. It was some kind of discarnate intelligence that was, playing with her or hurting her. Now, as my book speaks about, as the article on my website thing about, if I had to make a bet, put a gun in my head, I'd say it was a very intense poltergeist case. I don't think it had anything to do with dead people. It's complicated. We know now what we didn't know then, there's a recipe before these things happen, recipe that will allow them to occur. And the recipe is pretty simple. It's one location, location, location. The environment's got to be geomagnetically or electromagnetically provocative to the person's body. Okay. 2 is you have to have an individual who's either seizure-prone or epileptic, or even just simply has problems coping with stress. It could be simply as having focal seizures. The 3rd is traumatic psychodynamics between the members of the household. Well, in Doris Beither's case, they were all present. However, she would not answer any question about her physical health. We knew she was drinking. We were drinking beer a lot. We were there. We don't know if that did or did not affect anything, because there's no way to prove it. She was drinking. She had every one of her children came from a different man. So she was kind of messed up emotionally about that. And there was a dysfunctional relationship on an Oedipal level between her and her 2 older boys. And like I said, I wrote something up for Fate magazine back in the 90s about this, or late 80s, I don't remember, it's a long time ago. And my book discusses this. My guess is this is one of the granddaddy of all poltergeist cases, because the phenomenon moved with her. Had we been able to run a full neurological workup on her, which we couldn't do, we were likely to found this either seizure-prone or epileptic. Temporal lobe, pliancy in that respect. So there we have it. Strange case.
Now, how did the movie come about?
Well, Frank D. Fellini wrote the novel, The Entity, became a bestseller. Mm-hmm. He wrote a screenplay. And by the way, the novel was a novel, which means it's more fiction than it is reality. And he wrote a really good screenplay. It was sold to American, I forgot the production company, independent production company. And Frank D. Fellini was supposed to direct it. Well, at the last minute, they wanted someone else. They brought a man by the name of Sid Fury. He started rewriting the script. He cut out some of the most important elements of the story. And obviously, we didn't try to freeze the ghost with liquid helium or nitrogen or whatever it was. We didn't replicate her house inside of a gym. There was no psychiatrist, as was played by Ron Silver in the movie. The case stands on its own. It was, I know what I saw is what I told to my colleague and other people that were there, and 2 friends of ours, one friend of my colleague, they passed out from what they saw. They couldn't take it, and they never came back after that. We were there, I think, 11 or 12 times over the course of several months, and it was an amazing case. Now we have instruments that didn't exist back then. Geomagnetometers, electromagnetometers, thermal imaging, all sorts of things we could bring in to measure the environment that didn't exist back then. Low frequency spectrometers, great things we could have brought in, but they didn't exist back in 1974. Now we bring instruments to every case we go to, and the pattern is always the same. The place and the face may change, but what we learn does not. And that's what's so fascinating about all of this.
Now, are there cases that you're investigating currently?
No. What was interesting about the question you just asked is that as the paranormal unreality genre kicked in on TV, the frequency of calls we got dramatically diminished, because apparently people would rather have actors come out to their house to investigate a case as opposed to having parapsychologists coming out.
Yeah.
Now, this is the equivalent of, its equivalent would be, you come home and, oh my God, your house is broken into and all your furniture's gone and your TV, your stereo's gone. And do you call the police or do you call actors who play police on a TV series? You call the police. So, it's, anyway, the last case we ever had was some years ago, and it was a woman in Pasadena, and our equipment, brand new batteries in all of our devices, every system went dead. All of our batteries failed collectively, which has never happened before. She showed us some pictures she took, and they didn't look like anything paranormal. They looked more like UFO activity. And we didn't tell her what this was. And before we left, she goes, tell me, does any of this relate to being abducted? We went, what do you mean being abducted? Well, like by, aliens. We went, what? She told us a story, and apparently it's a pretty interesting case. We were going to follow it up as often as we could. But the church she was going to told her there was demons, and you have to give us your memory cards from your camera, or you're gonna be haunted. It's gonna kill you. And her teenage son was so freaked out by all that was going on, he left. He went to live with his father. And the woman was actually very pleasant. She had some problems, and she was around my age, and she looked like she was in her 20s. But the point of it is that the pictures were more consistent with what we see regarding UFOs. Now, this brings up another point. This is in my book and on my website. We've had a number of cases that began as poltergeist activity and then evolved into either a CE3 or a CE4. CE3 is you see occupants of UFOs. CE4 is where you're abducted. And we've had cases that began as poltergeist and broke out, turned into a CE3 or 4, or more frequently began as an abduction, which of course you cannot prove, because how do you prove it unless you're there and you have some way of validating it or verifying it? But it begins that and evolves into paranormal fallout. Suddenly,
well, like the Brian Scott case.
Right, Brian's situation was really unusual, and I haven't dealt with him in more than 40 years. I remember the fire broke out in his bed, and there was no accelerant on it. And when he started speaking in a strange way, and we had the tape analyzed by some friends in the government, and they said, well, this is a machine, it's not a human. No, we were there. No, this is not a person, this is a machine. And that was a long time ago. And his hair went gray real fast. I remember that. And I haven't talked to him in more than 40 years.
Well, he's deceased. I did check up on him.
I didn't know.
Yeah. Now, didn't he also get some messages? And he went to, I think, Lake Titicaca in Peru.
I don't know.
This is like 40 years ago. But he received a message to go there. Yeah, and I don't remember what happened, but he had a problem where he was being possessed by some entity. I mean, he had a name.
I remember. I remember he told us that. The one thing, again, when you're present with someone, they fall on their bed in front of you, and you see the sheath of flame rise up from the bed around them. You put it out. There's the bed linens are burned and charred, yet there's no accelerant present there to have triggered the fire.
Now, you were there when this happened. Were you there when this happened? Yeah. Okay. Yes. Was there any heat that was given off?
Yes, it wasn't. It was like poof, like a sudden whoosh, and we snapped back, and then we put it out. It went out pretty quickly. It singed the bed linens and all that, the covers, but there was no accelerant. How do you make fire pop out without an accelerant and no heat source? There was no ignition source. It wasn't hot. There was no accelerant. So what causes that? We don't know.
Well, do you think this ties in? There have been a lot of cases over the years of spontaneous combustion where people have actually,
right.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Have actually caught on fire.
Yeah. I've read a lot of books about it. Once you get past what they call the wick effect, where people start burning because they drink too much or they had a cigarette and they start burning slowly. Yeah, well, that's not spontaneous human combustion. Real spontaneous human combustion occurs very rapidly and is blue or blue-green flame and can reduce the body to ash within a minute or two, which normal wick effects cannot do. And there have been some really incredible cases out there. I met a girl, decades ago, whose father was a police captain, and he ran into a few cases like that. And it scared the hell out of him. It really terrified him, the whole thing. So, I don't know. All I know is we've had, there was a TV network executive, began with a poltergeist case, evolved into an abduction. That's in my book. I'm writing a new book, by the way. I can't tell you the title, but it's going to be somewhat controversial. It's going to go into more depth about what we've learned and what this suggests, and more about things about my past I've never discussed. Very quickly, in 2014, it was early fall. It was warm. My cleaning lady came over to clean the house, so I'm taking a shower by myself, doors closed, and suddenly you're banging and banging. It's Maria. She's going crazy. I jumped up at my robe, but what's the matter? She goes, I saw you at your computer. I go, what? She goes, I just saw you. Well, I was at the computer. No, I heard you in the shower, and then I turned into your bedroom, and I could see that you were sitting in front of the computer. No, I've been in the shower for like 8 or 9 minutes. It really freaked her out, and she didn't come back after that. So what was that? Doppelganger? Bilocation? I had things that kept disappearing on me. I had 3 vials of medicine, big vials of medication I needed to take. They were in the closet, in a padded mailer. The box disappeared. The medication disappeared. Not there. A suit disappeared. Shoes disappeared. My cell phone disappeared once. I put pills down on my desk one night to take them, and I turned back. The pills are gone. I found them months later when I got up on a ladder to change the light in the kitchen. They were sitting on the top of the refrigerator that I could not see because I'm not that tall. So, what's going on? I can't tell you. All I know is, as I'm getting older, this stuff seems to be increasing around me, not decreasing. So I don't know.
Now, do you think... Oh, okay, well, I think we're coming up for a break here, but after we come back, I want to talk to you about how you see UFOs as tying in with a lot of this paranormal phenomena. It's been a fascinating career. There's no doubt about it. And somebody who, you hear a lot of stories and a lot of claims and all, but to actually have people research it and be able to at least prove it to some degree. And I do remember the photographs that you had taken. There's another case we investigated in Black.
You're gonna have to hold, Tim. You're gonna have to hold that thought because we have to go to our top of the hour break. We'll be back in just a few minutes with more Dr. Barry Taff on Exploring the Bizarre. So stay tuned.
Now back to Exploring the Bizarre with 2 of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal, your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Welcome back to Exploring the Bizarre. I'm Tim Swartz with Tim Beckley, and our guest tonight is Dr. Barry Taff. And Tim, I know that you wanted to talk a little bit real quick about a coincidence that you had.
Yes. Well, do you find, Barry, that synchronicity plays any part in this? Because I've done a whole a book that's like 450 pages of all these weird. I'm not just talking about thinking of somebody and they call you on the phone. The next day, or waking up and the clock says 444, which I don't even understand what that means. But I mean, I'm just talking about stuff that you can't possibly explain. It's like somebody is controlling the situation. Anyway, back in the late 60s and early 70s. I was directing the New York School of Occult Arts and Sciences. It was probably one of the first metaphysical schools in the country. I mean, there were spiritualist churches in Harmony Grove and Giant Rock Airport, but ours was a little bit more, I was going to say serious, but that's probably not the proper word. Anyway, we had people like Cleve Baxter, Dr. Stanley Krippner, a lot of psychics and all, and they would come in and lecture. Now, the fellow I kind of liked, I got a kick out of him, was Alan Vaughan. He had a good sense of humor. I mean, he took the subject seriously, but you could sit down and have a beer with him and crack a couple of jokes. And so eventually he moved to San Francisco. He took a job when there were jobs in the field as editor of Psychic magazine, a very polished publication on parapsychology. Different than Fate magazine, because Fate magazine is kind of like short stories and people that have had experiences, but this was more of a kind of a scientific background. But I lost track with him. Then I was invited to give a talk to the Congress of Scientific Ufologists, which was kind of ridiculous because there were no scientists involved in the group. But the guy had rented, the local chairman of the group had rented an auditorium and held like 400 people. And I gave a talk on, I think it was either Friday or Saturday night. And my plane was leaving back to New Jersey, Newark Airport, Sunday afternoon, but rather late in the day. So we had some time to kill. We picked it was the promoter, his wife, and a few other members. I don't know who they were. His name was Dale Reddick. Okay, so we sat down to order brunch. I got my Bloody Mary, and we were looking at the menu. And I happened to mention, I said, gee whiz, I wish I had thought of this because I know my friend Alan Vaughan has moved out here from New York to San Francisco, and I should have been courteous enough to call him on the phone and invite him to my talk. And then we could have gone out for a beer later on. Well, 2 minutes later, the door to the bar swings open, and a gentleman comes walking into the bar with a dog on a leash. Well, I had never been in this. I'd never been in San Francisco before. The people that were with me had never been in this restaurant. We picked it out at random, and I look at this guy and I said, "Well, this can't possibly be, but that sure in the hell looks like Alan Vaughan." Okay, here's a city that has 1 million people in it. What's the chances of somebody that you're talking about come through that door 2 minutes later? So I motioned for the fellow to come over, and sure enough, it was Alan Vaughan. And he sat down, and we had a good laugh about it, and hugged each other and so forth. And I said, well, Alan, it's good to see you. What are you working on? He said, I'm doing a book on coincidences and synchronicity. I guess I'll have to include this in it. And that's the little paperback book that you can still find in flea markets and all. I think we're case number 37 or something. But I've had stuff like this happen over and over and over and over, and it seems to tie in a lot with the UFOs.
Well, I can tell you, on my website, there's one article called "Very, Very Personal and Enduring Synchronicities." And this friend I had since 1973, a man by the name of Richard Christian Matheson. He's the son of the now deceased writer, Richard Matheson. So he and I met, both the father and the son and I met in March of 1973. They walked in the lab. Richard, the son, and I have the same birthday, month, day, and time. And I won't bore everyone with the details because there's all this stuff on my website. There's so many state-specific links and synchronicities. We're going like, what? What does it mean? We don't know. And then the last things, when my mom passed away 10 years ago, he had met my parents a long time ago when I first met him, but he didn't remember their names. What was her name? I said, Ruth. And he got really quiet on the phone. I said, what's the matter? He goes, do you remember, do you ever meet my mom? I go, no. Her name is Ruth. I went, what? Huh? And that's just the tip of the iceberg. It seems that these things may occur much more frequently than people expect, but people sometimes ignore it, and they don't really. It kind of like, oh well, big deal. But if it keeps occurring to you, over and over, like something's trying to tell you something, you either ignore it or you can put it to use if it keeps occurring. Another quick story.
I've been trying to figure out that very concept, and I thought I was going to win some big money in Atlantic City because I was on my way to the casino with my friend Maria, who writes books on psychic phenomena. And we passed this bed and breakfast, and on the roof are statues, bronze statues of the Blues Brothers. And Dan Aykroyd, we know, has a great interest in UFOs and the paranormal. And I mentioned that, and the fact that to my friend, and I mentioned that, and the fact that when he was growing up, they used to hold seances in his home in Canada, and his grandparents were members of the local spiritualist group. Okay, so we get to the hotel, the casino where we're staying. We get off the bus. We go into the lobby to pick up our free chips for the afternoon that we never even spend because we don't go there to gamble. We go there just to look at the ocean. And lo and behold, as we step up to the cage to get our certificate validated, what happens? But the music comes on to Ghostbusters. Now, there's no, it's not even like there's a disc jockey in the room. We're talking about in the lobby, right? It's programmed. It's programmed in Pandora or something. God knows where. In Illinois or in Costa Rica, even. Who knows?
Right.
How did they know that we had just been talking about Dan Aykroyd and the music? So I said to Maria, let's look and see if there are any Ghostbusters slot machines, because maybe they're trying to tell us something, and we'll take this $25 certificate they gave us, drop it into the machine, and walk away with $100,000. Well, it turned out that there had been 2 Ghostbusters slot machines, but they were penny slot machines, and they were gone. So even if we won, what would we have won? $149 or something,
Right.
So that's the closest of anything like pointing in a direction of something we should have done. The other stuff is just purely random, and it's kind of like the trickster element, and it's kind of funny and hysterical at times to the people, to the person that it happens to. But the actual meaning, I don't know, except that Philip K. Dick believed we were living in a computer simulation.
Well, let me give you one quick story on synchronicities.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Girl I spoke of earlier in the show, a girl I spoke to first in 2014 named Nicole. Never met her. So I come out, I moved out of LA. I'm down here in the middle of nowhere in the desert. And I started talking to her last year. So, I've never known another girl named Nicole in my life, ever. This is the only one. I've never met her or spoken to her. Suddenly, I meet a friend of one of my friends down here. His wife's Nicole. Oh, okay. One of the surgeons I've been going to see about my eyes in LA, her name is Nicole. The head of the office, the woman that heads up the office there, is named Nicole. Then I get a call from some show back east, and the woman on the phone is named Nicole. But what? And then there's some Vegas call. They're saying about, talk to you about something, whatever, named Nicole. I go, what's going on? So I thought, this is a bad indicator regarding the girl I've talked to, the one who I've looked like Joan Collins. And it's like the universe is warning me, be careful, the Nicole that you talking to that you like is going to present a real big problem. Keep away. Yeah, turns out the Nicole that I was talking to was a couple of fries short of a Happy Meal. She lies and misconstrues things and make things up and fabricate stuff and misrepresent things. And I said, boy, am I glad I didn't marry her. She says one thing, then she says something else, and then changes her mind. She told me she was 40. She's actually 2 years older than me, but she lied about everything.
Well, that's a big stretch.
No. But I mean, the whole point of it is, like, everyone must evaluate, in my opinion, a synchronicity based on the way they perceive their world. And for some people, it's trivial entertainment. To others, like the universe is telling you something. You can choose to ignore it. You can choose to pay a little attention to it to perhaps better your existence.
So now, do you think that there's some big master plan here?
Well, yes and no. I don't believe a plan, but I do not believe in free will. In my book and on my website, story after story, how many coincidences make a fact? 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, a million? It gets to a point where, all right, stop. It's not coincidence anymore. What is it? We don't know. Why is it that people who have abductions or sometimes just CE3s start having paranormal fallout afterwards? Spontaneous healings, out-of-body experiences, poltergeist outbreaks, things like that. The energy that UFOs operate with, they're not using energy we're familiar with. There's no evidence that they're using nuclear as we know it, electromagnetic as we know it, or gravity, but they're able to use those, coupled with that, produce effects in our world. Machines that can do things we can't even imagine of, and it's still going on. So I have a funny feeling that whoever these things are, whoever is behind them, whatever they are, have mastered energies we call paranormal that they use to power their technology. It would be like bringing a new Corvette to someone from 5,000 years ago. They'd freak out. What is it? A car. Well, why does it make all that noise? How is it moving? Why? What does it mean? They wouldn't understand it because they don't know what a car is. We're pretty much in the same place, but in my book and in the new book, there's been a lot of cases I've worked on where this stuff has torn people apart because how do you talk to people about this? People tend to be afraid of what they don't understand. That's the way the human condition works. And as I said before, we were talking privately, that if I had $1 for every person I've terrified who's run away from me, I'd be very wealthy right now. My problems would all be solved. It's fun and games to people until it interferes with their either religion or their perspective on reality. Everyone's got a threshold, and if that threshold is crossed, people decide, I can't take this anymore, and they run away from it very quickly. And, it's like, I meet people, whatever, you do shows, and people, ever been married? I said, are you kidding? I said, I've never met any girl in my life that's interested in what I'm interested in for the same reasons. A lot of times people get into this field to basically get rid of their own personal emotional demons, to their problem, thinking it's going to help them. I said, I wouldn't bet on that. Why? I just wouldn't bet on it. And, things go wrong. And yeah, it's, that was, there was an old friend of mine who passed away this year, Jose Escamilla.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah, we knew him. Yeah,
I've known Jose for decades. So he introduced me to a girl I met in the early 80s, and I met her like 83, and really attractive brunette, blue-eyed, named Jody. So we go out to dinner once. We both meet at a restaurant. And she said, oh, Jose said you're psychic. What can you do? I said, I can diagnose you. You can. Okay, so I'm doing my thing. I do nothing about Jody other than the fact that she was very attractive. And I said, well, let's see. You've got some GI problems, upper and low. But I said, your main problem is you have endometriosis. She goes, what? You have a follicular cyst on your left ovary. She goes, what? How do you know that? I said, well, you asked. I don't know. So calls back a few weeks later, went to her OBGYN. I was right. She goes, the doctor asked her, how did this guy know it? He looked at me. So the doctor called me, and I said, I can't tell you what I do because I don't know. Do you know how you breathe? No, you just breathe. Do you know how you talk? No, the words form in your mouth because your brain works. But I mean, I was looking at her, and I said, she goes, what's endometriosis? She didn't even know what it was because, unless women had run-ins with it, they wouldn't know what it is.
Yeah.
So but what the UFO stuff is, there's been a lot of some releases of data on it recently, that it's been discovered that even when the stuff was first being encountered back during World War II, the Air Force or the Army Air Force or the military were terrified to deal with it as well. It's in the sky, it's coming down, so it might be a minion from God warning us of the end of the world. Oh, God, what? And guess what? People still think that way.
Mm-hmm.
It must, if it isn't God, it's got to be the devil. I said, what if in the end result of all this, we discover that we're not who we think we are? What if we discovered that we were created by another race of beings for something we can't even imagine? What would that do to our consciousness? What would that do to our religions? How would that affect the Middle East? We already have crazy people running into the war, screaming their name of God because they believe they do, and you don't believe what they believe in. It would be very bad. And if this is true, and I have a funny feeling it is, then, and this is in my book and on my website, the worst thing the government could do would make full disclosure, because it wouldn't better us. It would hurt us in the long run. Long in the future, we may understand it. Right now, unless it affects your daily life and your job, your ability to exist and eat and be well, people don't care. It just,
Yeah, you're right about that. But to the people whose life it does affect, it is the most all-consuming thing of their existence, and that's the problem with this kind of. It's like the people who believe based on their own involvement in the whether it's an abduction or a close encounter or being taken over by some entity. They go out and become, in some cases at least, fanatics about this. And then the other people who have never had a sighting or an experience and may only casually watch something on the History Channel couldn't care less one way or the other, because it doesn't put a chicken in everybody's pot, and it doesn't do much to affect their lives. And if it did affect their lives, it probably would. Like circumvent their religious beliefs and everything that they've been told since childhood is true, which turns out would not be true for sure. Yeah, Tim, I'll let you throw in a few questions here.
Well, I thought that his comment about the government and the military running into the whole religious aspect of UFOs, especially because it wasn't that long ago, Tim, that was it somebody we had on the show that mentioned that, I mean, even up to now, that there is a resistance to investigating UFOs because so many people in the government and the military are very hardcore religious and think that looking into this type of stuff somehow violates the Bible or their religious beliefs.
Also, it will release Satan onto the earth as if he hasn't been strolling along as it is.
yeah.
but just imagine, gentlemen, for one moment, if the world, let's say the Western world, and told the entire world, the military told that we know all this stuff, they've been coming here, they created us, we would have an inconceivable past and an unimaginable future then. It would be the most socially disruptive thing to happen to us since Christ died on the cross.
Yeah.
It would be horrible, because then, oh wait, so now you people are telling us that our God isn't good and our God isn't right, that this is God. It wouldn't go over real well. Our culture, for the most, the Western world exists on the concept of domestic tranquility. And that's all they care about, that you pay your damn check every April 15th. You write that check or you go to jail. That's all. And if suddenly we discover the government can't really protect us against this, and they've been lying to us and we're not who we think we are, then everything changes. Because we don't look at them as God anymore.
Yep. All right, gentlemen, we're coming up rapidly to the end of the program. We got about 2 minutes left. So, Dr. Taft, why don't you let our audience know where they can find you online, your book, where they can get that, and maybe some hints on your book that you're currently writing on.
Right. Well, my website is www.barrytaft.net. And Taff is spelled Taff, like Frank. So barrytaff.net. You'll find there's over 100 articles I've published on there about the work. My book is Aliens Above, Ghosts Below. I don't believe it's still in print. It got well received. It's supposed to educate and inform people and hopefully entertain them. Send me a copy
and we'll scan it. Send me a copy and we'll scan it and put it out there. We did that with Barry Downing recently. He sold 1,000 copies of his book.
Mm-hmm. I'll have to talk to my publisher about that if I can do that. But anyway, in my next book, I can't discuss in too much detail other than the fact that it's going to be far more controversial. It's create a lot of frustration, anxiety, and it's going to cause kind of a generalized, I guess, worry about this stuff's getting too real.
All right, Tim, we got a minute left.
Oh, all right. Well, we want to announce the availability of our book in just a couple of days, Alien Strongholds on Earth, where you can go and have a UFO encounter if you want to, and hopefully stay away from the bad guys and find yourself a couple of cuddly little ETs to get involved with, right? And don't forget our YouTube channel, Mr. UFO's Secret Files, where you can see all this in a glorious video and animated form, thanks to Peter Bernard. And good night, everybody. And Barry, thank you for being on with us. Tim, we'll talk to you soon. And Tina, our producer, stay out of trouble in Vegas there.
You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. They're taking back the night by jetting non-stop across the cosmos in search of the truly bizarre and totally unexplained, with you as their co-pilot. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on Exploring the Bizarre and hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz, check out their KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow their YouTube channel at MRUFO 1100. Exploring the Bizarre.